Our role at DECD is to help grow the economy, grow the jobs that are here, grow the population. That's what I see as my sort of three-part mission.
Just a quick reminder for you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. I am really excited to welcome Alexandra Daum, the Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development. Alexandra, thank you so much for coming on
Thanks
today.
for having me.
So this is my pleasure. It's the Made in America podcast.
Yeah.
So we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
I know. I had fair warning on this, and I would love to have a cooler answer. Most people probably have a very cool, tangible, they probably have it in their hand they can show you.
Often.
Anyway, I make the Connecticut economy better. Is that an inbounds answer to the question? Yeah, so our role at DECD is to help grow the economy, grow the jobs that are here, grow the population. That's what I see as my sort of three-part mission. And the way we're going to make the economy better by doing all those three things.
And no question about that, right? Bigger economy, more jobs, and more people. So we love that. Why? Why do you do it? Why Commissioner of DECD?
Why do I personally do it? Not why is that the mission of
Correct.
the organization. Why do I personally do it? Well, I think this is I think this is the dream job for someone who has experience and interest in the business world, which I do. And I went to business school, spent most of my career up until this job in the private sector. But then if you have that hope to give back, not to use a cheesy term, but if you have that hope to make a bigger impact than on just your one company where you happen to work, this job is the greatest combination of you get to be thinking about business problems, working with business people, but your mandate is that higher goal of making a big difference across a big sector of the population, i.e. the whole state or anyone that interacts with the economy.
Right, yeah, which is a pretty big portfolio.
Everyone, yeah.
So that I love how you sort of framed that up, and I think one of the we've had your predecessor David Lehman on a couple of times, and I'm a believer that there's really needs to be an important symbiotic relationship between the different aspects of the economy, and whether right or wrong. You look at government, I look at sort of the private business, I look at education, and and the nonprofit sector, and I think those all need to work together if we're going to kind of get together. So it's great to sort of be able to have you on and engage. Obviously, we'll focus on manufacturing here. I wonder if we could just sort of start with your background. I mean, you sort of alluded to it, a little bit that you were in the private sector, but let's kind of just sort of run through, like, are you a nutmegger from day one? Like, kind of give us how you got to this job and to here.
Sure. I am a New Yorker, but I always say, please don't hold that against me. That was a former identity that I've shed 5 years ago when I moved to New Haven, and New Haven is home and Connecticut is home, and I'm madly in love with New Haven. I'm a city person, and so I would say I'm really passionate about Connecticut cities, and I think we'll get into that later. But that's how that New York background really plays in, is that grew up with sirens and pigeons and all that, and I love urban environments, and I think Connecticut's urban environments are really underappreciated. So I think hopefully we'll get into that later, but mentioning that now just in case. And so background was moved to Connecticut for basically that lifestyle, for that small city lifestyle, and before that, my experience was in mostly real estate development, and that's how I found my way to DECD as well. Because we have the E and the C. People we jokingly distinguish between E, economic development, C, community development. We have a very big portfolio of physical investments, of real estate investments across the state. And so when I came in first as deputy commissioner, it was using my background in multifamily residential development, for some pretty big developers, also for some pretty small developers, and then also working for myself. So I had a lot of real estate experience, brought that to the department, and then slowly expanded my portfolio within the department to what it is today, which is the whole department.
Oh, right. That's how you've expanded as big as it can expand.
It's certainly expanded.
Yeah. So the real estate development connected you with DECD because of that real estate portfolio? I didn't quite track that.
Yeah, just that we actually, probably about half of our activity and a very big percentage of the dollars that we put out are into community development projects all across the state. So a lot, you drive past a construction site with cranes, and it could be anywhere. It could be in a small town, could be in a big city, and you'll frequently see on the side of the building, funded by Governor Lamont and the Department of the Economic and Community Development. So it's not something maybe that your listeners are as aware of as part of our mission, but it's definitely equally important to all the business support that we do, is this physical support that we give to our downtown. Again, it could be lots of different types of projects, but we are investing a lot of state money directly into real estate projects, whether they're infrastructure or housing or offices or manufacturing space or remediating blighted properties. It's a lot of what we do. It's a big part of that C, the community development, is kind of how I distinguish it. Yeah. And so that was the half of the agency that I came in to run initially with that real estate experience. And then to have taken on, not just in the last couple months, but way longer, a longer time than that ago, had started to take on the E part too, the economic development part. Yeah. And it's a little bit of a false, I don't mean to create a distinction between those two. Clearly, community development also creates economic development.
Sure.
If you're creating these amazing cities in which people want to live and work, that's creating economic development. So I don't want to create that false division between them as if they're two totally separate things.
Yeah, well, they're connected. I guess that's why they're in one,
Exactly.
in one agency. Yeah, that makes sense. So let's peel it back a little bit and just sort of talk about your thoughts on how you can help move, things forward. I mean, eventually want to get into manufacturing specifically, and we can certainly talk about the urban environment, how that all links back. But, now that you've taken on the role, well, let me ask you a first question, which is it what you thought it was going to be? Mm-hmm. I mean, right. So you were deputy for a while, and I know that, seemed like there was a plan mm-hmm. to put you in this thing. It didn't get sprung on you last minute. So how is it now that you're here? Because you've been officially 3 months?
Yeah, 3 months since the first week of January. It is exactly what I expected, and what I expected was quite a lot of hard work on behalf of the businesses and taxpayers of Connecticut. And it's what I signed up for, and I'm enjoying it and looking forward to continuing to do it. I had the benefit of watching my predecessor, Commissioner Lehman, work work very, very hard, as you commented on when you met. I listened to the last time he was on the show, and you commented on just how available and how hard he worked at this job. So I knew exactly what I was getting into, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity, extremely grateful to Governor Lamont for appointing me, and it's been great.
So as we're looking at sort of going to making an impact, right, which I know is something that's really important to you, how do you think about DECD being able to make a really positive impact to grow the economy and help businesses grow? So
I will answer that question with sort of the four things that we do, the four big buckets of activity mm-hmm. that we do, because I think that's the easiest way to illustrate it. And I'll be fast, and we can dig into any of them that you want. So the big buckets that I see are, one, attracting new businesses to the state and supporting the growth of existing businesses. And ideally there, the big metric we're focusing on is job creation. Then the second bucket is supporting small businesses. These seem like the same activities, but they're not. Small businesses frequently need very different things from the bigger businesses I mentioned in bucket one, and that frequently takes the form of access. The small business support frequently takes the form of technical assistance on how to run a small business when you may not be a sophisticated owner, and also access to small business loans. The third bucket is this community development piece that I mentioned at the beginning of a couple of minutes ago, which is just around creating physical environments that people want to work in and live in. And then the last bucket is we're responsible for marketing the state, and marketing it not just as a place that people want to come visit. So we do have tourism under us, but as a place where people want to come live and work and move their business ideally. So all those things are connected. Clearly, you want to get them all right, and hopefully that all adds up to 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 = 10, as opposed to 4. But those are the ways in which I think we can move the needle, and and happy to get into any of them.
Yeah, look, I mean, it certainly makes a ton of sense, right? I mean, helping businesses grow and attracting new businesses, helping small businesses become bigger businesses, making communities where those employees want to live, and then letting everyone know how well it's working. I mean, right? I can sort of see how you could
appreciate that.
Build
you
something
think it
from
makes
these.
sense? Good.
Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly does on paper, that's for sure. But I wonder, when you think about, you take a sort of step back, right? There's only so many things someone can accomplish at any one time. And I wonder, as you look at the state of the economic environment, what do you see as sort of the number 1 and 2 things that most need to happen to actually make the biggest positive impact?
Well, frustrated by you limiting me to 1 and 2. So I'm gonna reserve the right to say these are not the 1 and 2. But anyway, here are 2 things I think are really important. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
Things that I think are really important. One is making sure that the state's reputation is actually matching the reality on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that we have a mismatch there, where we have had significant improvements in what it's like to do business in Connecticut. We've had a lot of folks choose to move to the state to bring their jobs and companies and capital investment to the state. And I think that's, proof is in the pudding. People I'm not making them do that. They're starting their business here or they're moving their business here because they identify that it's a good place to do business. But the state's reputation has not caught up with that. I think we are sometimes stuck in a rhetoric of sort of 10 years ago of, don't bring your business here. In fact, get out as fast as you can. Highest, unpredictable taxes and unpredictable fiscal situation, et cetera, et cetera. That's clearly not the case anymore. We're in an extremely strong fiscal position, still have lots of pension liabilities to work on, but we're making really big inroads on that front, which was one of the biggest complaints of the business community, along with just a host of other positive trends going in the right direction. And I think the reputation has not caught up with that. And that frustrates me a lot. But not only frustrates me, inspires me to try to fix that problem. I think that's a big issue that we have. And of course, there's still problems on the ground. I want to be very clear as I deliver this message of, I'm not just saying my work is done fixing the reality on the ground and now I'm only about out there marketing. I'm going to keep working to fix the reality on the ground and always looking for ways that businesses can think of that we could be helping with the regulatory environment, helping with just the ease of doing business. But also where we have had progress, where we have made wins, let's make sure we're getting credit for it and that story is out there. So that's one. And then 2, I think, I'm gonna focus on an element of the workforce issue that many of your listeners are feeling. So I guess I could be broad and just say, okay, the other thing is workforce. I want to.
It's a good thing you're going to go deeper because I wouldn't have let you get away with that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to go one level down on something that I think we can impact, which is now more than probably even just 18 months ago, I feel like employers are really making that connection between workforce issue and housing issue. I'm hearing that even from CBIA, who didn't have the word housing anywhere on their top priorities 18 months ago. It's now one of their top 10, and it's on their list of, I think they have 12 legislative priorities. Housing is on there, and I think if they were to rank them, it's very high on there. So the ability for people to move to this state and to live here affordably, or to stay in the state affordably if they already live here, is a key driver of whether we can continue to fill open positions across our industries, especially in manufacturing, where you have people that span a wide range of income levels. And so I'm hearing from businesses, and including definitely manufacturers as I go around the state, that housing is a big issue for them. And that's somewhere where I think DECD can make a big difference. We have a lot, like I mentioned, we're investing a lot in our downtowns and in physical projects, and moving more and more towards ensuring that there's a variety of housing choices in the projects that we're funding is important. We've been doing that since I started. My background is as a housing developer, so you can imagine a little bit of a bias in a good way towards that. But making sure that all of our investments are not just helping a community to look nicer or whatever, to be facetious. That's clearly not the goal. It's to make sure that whatever investment we're making in a community makes it someplace that actually is going to help the businesses that operate there and nearby.
So that makes a ton of sense, and I think the reputation to me sort of stands on its own. I don't know how much we need to dig into that. I would ask the question. It is interesting that when I asked you for 2, that was one of the top 2. So do you view that? And I'm going to dig deep into workforce. So if anyone's listening, saying, "My God, how can he not be on that?" Don't worry, I'm getting there. We'll spend a lot of time on it. But I just wanted to quickly tick this off the list. Sounds like you think the reputation, or the mismatch in the reputation, is really a drag on your efforts.
I do, and I think it's particularly coming up in 2023, where it feels like the economic winds are shifting, or there's just more economic uncertainty, than there was kind of in the immediate COVID recovery. All the trend lines were going up because, of course, you're everything was up from where we had been
Right.
in COVID, right?
When it goes way, way, way down. Right. Yeah.
That is how that works.
Yep.
And Connecticut did a great job recovering from COVID. And so I think somehow I perceive that in just sort of as we've plateaued in our COVID recovery, there's been a reversion to the way of thinking about Connecticut as sort of in a pre-COVID tone of like, oh, we're slow, we're stagnant, we're a bad place to do business. I'm hoping that everyone on this that's listening to this podcast is going to say, oh, that's weird. I never think that. I never hear that. Great. That would be great. If I'm creating a problem that's not there, then that's great. But I have been feeling that there's sort of a shift back to those types of narratives. And we're just in such a different position. The governor just announced a proposed middle-class tax cut. So that should be that's an extremely exciting narrative that will impact many, many employees of many manufacturers. There's probably manufacturing employees are kind of a prime target if you look at the income ranges and all that are going to be impacted. So we're in a great spot, and I do think that reputational issue could for no good reason really hold us back.
Yeah, listen, there's no question, and that's true for people. It's true for businesses too, right? Like if you've got a bad reputation, but your actually services or your products are great, it's a huge problem, right? Because you can't, making your product better without improving your reputation doesn't actually really create all the impact. Now, you can't have a crap product and then work on the reputation. You've got to fix the facts before you fix the reputation, but totally makes sense. And do you guys, is that a DECD achievable target? Like, do you guys have the capability to change that narrative?
I think so. I think we did it a little bit of a guerrilla style over COVID. We did it, I think, because of just I hope your listeners will agree, the largely positive interactions between DECD and businesses during and immediately after COVID. I think we didn't need to be doing such a concerted top-down marketing effort, so to speak, because I think our businesses were feeling it. And listen, I know a lot of businesses would have liked to have been more open than they were and less restricted than they were. Nothing's perfect, but we think that compared to our peer states, we did a good job of working with the business community to try to meet in the middle. And so I think it was a little bit more of in the zeitgeist, we were all feeling that positive interaction, that positive business environment. Now, without that, and now I think we need to be a little bit more top down about it and have I'm working on a really concerted year-long campaign that is hitting people with just a digestible amount of facts of everything that we've achieved over the last 2 years, so that it's really front and center. And I think we talked about as before we started taping, this job has a big external facing role. And so I just see that as my mission as I'm going to 3 breakfasts a week, which is kind of my pace right now, to chamber.
It's better than 3 breakfasts a day, Alexandra.
Oh yes, very true. That would not be good for my figure. No, I'm on the scrambled egg circuit. So I would, as I do that, I could go up there and just I feel like I have a mission as I'm on that circuit to really make use
facts.
Of that.
Yeah, look, shining the light on the facts, and the facts are in favor of the message that you want. That's a really great place to be. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to move off of this, and I will, but I will give one last piece, which is, I do hear from manufacturers, including people that have been on the show, about they do have individual positive experiences. And so having them share that, I think, would always be a positive. I will say, and this may be a bit out of your control, but on the flip side, I do get a sense of my own feelings, but also what I hear from people is it feels there's like a little bit of a schizophrenia going on in the messaging people are hearing, from the government, right? So on the one hand, we'll talk about MIF, we'll talk about some of the other programs and the work that DCD and the state's doing, especially on the executive branch side, that feel really positive and supportive. And then on the flip side, every time you turn around, it's like some other proposed issue about paid leave and this tracking that, and it just sort of feels like, can we get some momentum? But there's some schizophrenia coming, and I think people paint with a broad brush. Honestly, everything from if they have a problem getting zoning in their local town to build, and this is a true story, to build an additional an addition to their building in the woods, and the town's like, it's going to change the character of the town. They paint that to the state government, right? Okay, so I realize that that's a big challenge, right?
That's just a part of my job.
That's part of your job. But anyhow, the schizophrenia is out there, so just maybe helping you to see.
No, I think that's fair. And that's why I said I don't want to make everyone think that I think the product, like you put it, is perfect and all I have to do is sell the product. I still want to continue to improve the product, i.e. the experience of doing business in the state. And so it's two parts. I want to keep hearing from manufacturers, from businesses, and from especially business associations, because that's the most helpful way to get feedback is, hey, 20 of my members are all saying this. That's super helpful to us. And especially if it comes with an action suggestion, like, and do this. I love those types of, love that type of feedback. So continue to take feedback, continue to try to improve the experience, but then where we have had wins, let's take credit for them.
Absolutely, 100%. So let's flip to workforce. I mean, we could spend the next 20 minutes on this, and I'll try not to do that, although I reserve the right to do it. Talk to me about that, because it is. I mean, look, this is not a Connecticut problem, right? This is a U.S. problem, and so we do have a lot of listeners outside and growing outside the state, and so I'd just be interested in sort of your view of. I went back to looking at this job creation concept and then creating jobs and moving businesses here. You've talked about that, and that's really important. And I think the private sector is looking and saying, hey, we've got jobs. We got lots of jobs.
Right.
We've got, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs. You know what we don't have is people to do the jobs.
Totally.
And so, talk to me about, I realized actually, I don't realize, maybe you have the one thing we can do that will solve this problem, and you will shed light on it right now and
Today's
fix the
the
whole
day
thing.
I fix the whole problem.
Yeah, go ahead, Alexandra. Let's do it. Let's put all that schooling, consulting, development background. Let's put that all to the test right now. What do you got?
Okay. So I think we think about I would think about the problem, in a couple different ways. There's, what are we doing? If you think about it like a factory, you've got your inputs and they're people, right? And then your factory line, which is training, and then your outputs, which are trained people and what you do with them. So I think our job is I think DECD's job is to participate at all parts of the. I'm coming up with
process.
Up with this live, which is probably not the smartest thing
good.
I've ever done.
I'm going to help you through it, but I like what you're working with.
Having never been a manufacturer, took one manufacturing class in business school, so here we go. So the inputs, I think, are very much our job. So getting more people to the state. And that's where we talked a lot about already, and we won't get too much more into it, but making sure that we're making this state a place that people want to live. We've got those environments that they're looking for, the housing that they're looking for, places where they can afford to live. I view that as a job of many parts of the state government, but certainly a big goal of DECD's is to bring in more of those inputs into the workforce equation. And then in terms of how they get trained, we have the Office of Workforce Strategy. I think Kelly's been here, I imagine, on the show, and they have two ways of training. They have two big strategies. One is setting up new programs, which they are doing with a whole bunch of federal funding, $130 million, I think, into Career Connect alone, which then is divided into 12. I should have these 15 or so sub programs that are really targeted at specific industries with really great partners that are proven and have a good track record. So that's how they're setting up new programs. There's also just a lot of existing resources for training in the state with amongst all of our community colleges, technical, high schools, technical. So they want to set up new programs, but they also need to be matching inputs into those existing resources, because we do have programs. You'd think with all the demand for manufacturing jobs, you'd think that all of our technical training would be at 100% capacity, and it's not. So matching people with those existing resources or existing training. And then as it relates to the outputs, I again think that's a big part of DECD's role, is to make sure that our employers know how to go get the trained people, where to find these trained people, what's the right match for them in terms of the skill sets they're looking for, either in the new programs that OWS is setting up or in the existing programs that have been there for historically. And then the last place that I think we play in is if we are working with a business and they look at our whole system and everything that's there to offer and they say, no, you're not training the right people. Even if you got the inputs and even if they went through the right thing, the outputs, there's nothing in this pool of trained people that actually fits what I need, then I think our job is, again, and this is Kelly's job too, but we're taking a heavy hand in introducing those employers to Kelly, to whichever schools are most appropriate, and tailoring the curriculum to make sure that we are training people that can ultimately go on to get jobs. Because with so many open jobs and so few inputs, that being, I think, really the big pain point for us is so few people going into the system. The worst thing of all is to train someone who's come to the table, agreed to be trained, and then they're actually not being trained for a job that's out there. That's the
But yeah, that would be. I mean, going back to your analogy, right? That's like taking an input, putting in all the energy to convert it to an output, and then nobody wants the output.
The trash.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
right. Exactly. Like, why would we make 8-track tapes? Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
the days are gone.
That's
right.
the worst.
Yeah. 100%. Right. We wasted a lot on the way there. So I think though you went. I think you did an admirable job of kind of converting this concept to this manufacturing idea. But I think you also mentioned something when you were talking that I want to just go back to, which is, I always look at trying to boil it down to like, what's the thing that we can control? Mm-hmm. Where's the bottleneck? Mm-hmm. And at the end, it does feel like it's the input part, mm-hmm. right? As you mentioned, we've got funding, we've got programs. They're not at capacity. And I don't believe that the reason that they're not at capacity is because we don't have demand for the output, to continue on that analogy, because I hear about the demand from the output on a almost hourly basis. And so I think that seems to be there, and there does seem to be a good alignment between what the processes we have in the middle for the inputs and the outputs we're producing. Obviously everyone's always going to complain a little bit, but I think we're broadly, we're broadly there. Look, I mean, everyone, even if you hire someone out of a college to work in consulting or real estate development, I'm sure exactly still got to train them a little bit. Right. So, but anyway, moving past that, it's that first input component, mm-hmm. right? And I just wonder where you are on that. Cause look, in business, you either build it or you buy it, mm-hmm. right? Is what they say. In humans, you either make them, and that's a, gonna be a while. That's like a 19, 20 year process, right? So that's going to take a bit, right? Cause I don't think we're going to change the child labor laws. And then, or we import it basically. Mm-hmm. And I think, when I look at it, I say to myself, hey, job one is let's keep what we have. Mm-hmm. And then 2, augment. Where are you on that? How do you view that? And where is that in the DECD portfolio? Yeah.
So I think there's two answers to your question of how to increase more people going into the process, into the pipeline. So one is
said differently, more workforce.
More workforce.
Yeah,
more people. How do we get more people to want to be in the workforce?
Yep.
So there's sort of 2. I'll break it into 2.
Sure.
So there's, on the macro level, is just getting more people to the state. Mm-hmm. And that's a sort of blunt instrument because we don't know if there are people that want to come here and work in manufacturing or in anything. But this blunt instrument, which we all believe in, is just increasing the state's population. Governor says all the time, we want to increase taxpayers, not taxes, right? So that is something,
in fact, at some point, more taxpayers means less taxes.
No,
right?
exactly, yeah.
Right,
it goes the inverse relationship there. So, so that is the macro answer to your question. Is I certainly see that as a big part of my mission. I think I said it in the minute two of the podcast. And so I think, we're working many of the parts of our job, but mainly the community development bucket and the marketing bucket, those sort of 3 and 4 that I mentioned at the beginning. Those are the places where we can be trying to move the needle on the population numbers overall. Now, I don't want to get into population numbers here because I don't have them all in front of me, there's a lot of different ways to slice it in and out. But we did well over the pandemic. In terms of population increase, but it's something we have to really keep an eye on because the Northeast in general is losing population, and so we gotta stay on top of that. And we also, I'm not comparing myself to Texas, right? I'm comparing myself to Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maine. So we gotta be realistic about our comparison set, but really keep our eye on the population numbers and try to move that needle, like I said, on a macro level. And then the micro answer to your question as to how to get more people is, I think, more on a program by program basis. So when you take these 13 Career Connect programs that I mentioned earlier, each one of them needs to have a tailored approach to bringing people into the system. Trying to get someone in to do training for becoming a lab technician that without a college degree, that is, you're reaching into very different populations from. They also have a lot of money going towards nursing. So these are just totally different populations. And I think there's probably 13 different populations across their different programs. And so I think making sure that there's a targeted, smart approach for each of those that is looking into the right population. And there's companies doing really creative things. I don't want to call out specific companies in a podcast because I haven't gotten their permission or whatever, but there are examples for example, of manufacturers, and you're going to know who I'm talking about, working with currently incarcerated individuals to come work in their facilities to be gaining skills, income while incarcerated, so that when they are released from prison, they have money, a resume, and a job in most cases at that manufacturer because of the good work they've been doing there. So everyone should be thinking creatively. I'm pivoting a little from the programs doing this, and the programs should be looking at new populations, and accessing them in more innovative ways. But companies should be doing the same thing too. And
you mentioned housing affordability as like the second item when you link to workforce. So like make that connection for me of what does affordable housing mean? Because I don't know that many people 100% even know what that means, right? Yeah. And how does affordable housing connect to this workforce challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, sorry, I didn't make a strong enough connection in my answer of saying how our macro job is to increase the population through this community development lens. Housing creation is a very specific tool of how we are going to increase the workforce. And because when I went, again, I don't want to call out specific manufacturers, but twice in the last week, I was in Aerospace Alley, and I'm becoming a regular there, obviously. And twice, the two different business unit heads or CEOs said to me, I just lost an amazing candidate because he was going to move from out of state, and he started to look at Zillow and just realized he couldn't afford a house here, and stayed at his job where he makes a little bit less, but the friction of moving and the cost of housing in Connecticut was just a barrier for him to move here. And at another place, they said, hey, we have all these we're hiring a lot of 25-year-olds, and we're in a part of the state where it's just not cool and sexy to live here. And we just can't get people, even if they're going to pay way more to live in a city in a different state, they're actually choosing to do that rather than come here because they just can't find a cool downtown-esque environment that's affordable. That's reasonable. So it's stopping people from taking jobs. It's stopping people from even applying for jobs. And it's causing people to leave their jobs when they're realizing, hey, I could get a similar job in a place where it would just cost me less to live in a similar house.
So this is maybe veering way off, but I'm just curious, and it is my show. So at some point, does that depress property values overall? I should connect my thoughts here.
Yeah.
So you're going to build affordable housing. So I guess that means maybe finding housing that's less expensive than what they can get today. Yeah. So what would happen to existing housing stock, right? Would you envision that would sort of depress increasing real estate values?
I didn't answer your earlier question, which was how to define affordable housing, right? And so this is a very important question. And it is not DCD's mission to build capital A affordable housing, which has all these real technical definitions in terms of income restriction, and generally has subsidies from the federal government in how to get the building built, because when you charge very little rent, you have to get subsidies from somewhere else. So that's the sort of capital A affordable housing that a lot of people have in their mind. I'm talking about really lowercase a affordable housing, which just means a place that you can live and not be really stressed out at the end of every month because there's no money left in your bank account. Right. The technical definition is people shouldn't be paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And that applies to everyone. It doesn't matter how much money you make, that if you're paying more than 30% of your income in housing, you are housing constrained.
Okay.
So that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to build housing of every type for every income level. And there are parts of the state whose job it is to do that capital A affordable housing. And DECD also, many of our projects include units that are capital A, but we also just want to build lots of housing for anyone that wants to come live here. If they want to live in a city, great. If they want to live in a suburb, great. We want to make sure everyone has somewhere where they they see a job listing, they're excited, they get the job, and then housing isn't the reason they don't move here.
Got
right?
it.
And it's not the reason.
So we were
take the
talking this
job.
whole time about lower A affordable housing.
Well, yeah, we're talking about broad availability, a wide range of housing. Some of that will be the capital A. I'm not discounting that. We certainly need the capital A affordable housing as well. But DECD participates in housing projects across the state that have a wide array of income levels and a wide array of physical manifestations. They're not all big, tall apartment buildings downtown,
And so how do you think about measuring success? Like if we were kind of circle back in 2 years, and be careful because I may do this and then ask you this question because it will be recorded. What would be the, if it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever the horizon is in that kind of concept, how do you think about looking back and going, yeah, we made we made an impact?
Yeah. I think just the sheer number of units that we're able to invest in. And we have this stat, and I apologize I don't have it with me, of how many DECDs contributed to in the past 2 years, and I would like that number to double.
Double.
Yeah.
All right, you heard it here first. 100% in 2 years. I like it.
Yeah, in the next 2 years, I would like that. I can't tell you it's definitely going to happen, but sure, that's definitely what I'm aiming for.
Nice. All right, I actually love it. So, last question. I want to get into some serious manufacturing stuff. So, you talked about urban living. You mentioned it as a challenge. This is no secret. You did mention pre-show and a little bit on the show how much you love New Haven, smaller version of Manhattan that you grew up in, but you do love it. And obviously there's been a huge growth in Stamford, right? But Waterbury, Hartford have not fared as well. Don't know too much about Danbury myself, but I know New London probably struggled a little bit. Sub base is helping, but I just wonder, do you view it as in DECD's portfolio to think about creating more attractive urban environments in those other smaller cities across the state? 100%.
100%. If we all have to live somewhere. I live in New Haven, but it does not mean that is the only city that's important to me. It's hard for all the cities you just mentioned, and they're all equally important, and they are all big focuses of our economic and community development strategies. Urban environments are just even if it wasn't a trend these days for people to want to live in urban environments, which it is, and we should try to capitalize on it. And I use that broadly. Of course, there's many people that still want to live in it, but there is an increasing trend of people wanting to live in urban environments. Even if that wasn't a trend, we just have Connecticut, our untapped potential is in our cities. So that would be the place that's the place that I'd be looking, even if there wasn't a trend to be a sort of nationwide trend of going towards urban environments, because our cities they have a lot of contaminated land, a lot of
brownfield issues,
a lot of industrial history, which some people might say, avoid the cities. They have an industrial contaminated history. I see it completely the opposite. We are very land constrained in Connecticut. It's very hard to find land that is not greenfield land that you can do something with to build a new factory, build a new apartment complex, whatever. Brownfields represent a big percentage of the land opportunity in this state, and a lot of them are in our industrial cities that, like you said, many people I think are kind of struggling or not the kind of place you'd want to live. I think it's the complete opposite. I think they have a great opportunity to currently be the kind of place you want to live, and even more so in the future.
But we'll need that. I think that I agree with you wholeheartedly, with this proviso that the challenge with the brownfields is like, it isn't just about cutting down trees and building something up. You've got to sort of clean up what's there. Is DECD in a position to help make that happen? Because it's that cost that I think is a real problem. Yeah. So
you have hit upon one of my favorite topics, which is the fact that
it only took me 28 minutes now.
We have a very robust brownfield remediation program, and it's been in place for a decade, or certainly has been very active since I've been in the role for 3 years. I've spent $25 million a year on brownfield remediation. And by the way, we're a small percentage of the capital stack on these projects. So when we spend $25 million, it's usually roughly a 1 to 10 match. So we're fueling $250 million worth of activity on these sites. And So that's going to continue. We've proposed another $25 million a year for the governor's proposed $25 million a year for the next 2 years. So yes, and a lot of the end use is manufacturing.
Yes, I'm aware.
It's a great why something that used to be manufacturing, which is why it's contaminated, why remediate it up? In some cases, it makes sense to do the full remediation so that people can live there. But in a lot of cases, let's remediate it to a standard where people can work there, and continue to have it be manufacturing. So that tool is out there. It's been well used, and I would encourage your listeners, if they're thinking of expansion projects, if they're thinking of, they should take advantage of that money.
So are there opportunities, and now I'll use this opportunity, thank you to pivot into manufacturing, and we can wrap up because I know we're running out of time, maybe even past the time you asked, you committed to. But I think there's a belief out there that, like, yes, there's money out there if the site has been abandoned and wants to be like reclaimed or whatever, but that there's people that are still operating on those sites or adjacent to those sites, and wondering, like, is there support for them to be able to, to do things? And I brought up with your predecessor about sort of the Transfer Act and the challenges. Because listen, I mean, yes, I think manufacturers broadly want to take responsibility for things that have happened in the past, but there's many manufacturers that have been operating for decades, some greater than a century in certain areas. And like, I'm sure the people in, 1923 had a very different view of how they got rid of their waste than they do in 2023. And it just seems silly to sort of like punish the 2023 people for 100-year-old decisions. Yeah.
So my answer will be somewhat unsatisfying. We do have a lot of provisions in there to not support the original polluters. So where there is a continuous chain of ownership from the folks that originally polluted, even if, to your point, they're long dead, the individuals, right? But or
also, I'm going to interrupt, which is like, I get it, but I sort of don't get it if the convention sort of changed, right? Like, 1923, it was probably in vogue to just go out the back and throw your trash
it definitely
in
was.
the back, which was allowed, right? And it seems odd that we sort of punish people for those decisions.
Yeah, I hear you. I think if money grew on trees and we could just remediate every property in the state, then we would probably be happy to just work with some of these existing contaminators, say, oh, whatever, let's put the past behind us. We have a lot of demand for these funds. So I think we want to put the priority where there's an abandoned site, where there's no one that we can hold responsible. And it's really, without the state's intervention, it's simply going to sit there for another 40 years or whatever, into perpetuity. So I think it's just a matter of prioritization. And we have a lot of examples of former polluters being good citizens and helping with whatever the future use is going to be, even if they don't even own the site. They may have sold it, but agreed to help. So to answer your question, we do prioritize sites that are in the worst shape. They're the most abandoned, the most underutilized. They haven't been. They're unable to be used other than state help. So that will not be what a manufacturer wants to hear, that has a site already that kind of wants to extend a little bit, and but everything's really actually kind of working just fine, and they're looking for a little bit of incremental help to expand. That is not probably the best use case for brownfields funding, but a manufacturer that sees a site across the street that they had nothing to do with, that is contaminated, and in order for them to get it going as their second location or as an extension location, that is, if they want up to $4 million from the state to, assuming there's $4 million of remediation costs there, of eligible expense, then that's a great use case. Like, people can look for more challenging sites that they might not have otherwise looked at for their second warehouse, their second location, whatever, because they might have thought, oh, this is too hairy and expensive, but we can help with that initial getting the ground clean. And then from there on, it's just more of a simple site to do a typical build.
Makes sense. Got to ask you about MIF. Maybe just sort of talk about what you know about it and kind of where we're headed with that.
Yeah. I remember when we had our pre-call, I said, is this old news to everybody? I don't want to repeat, but we definitely have a great asset in MIF. And like the brownfields, it's been well funded going forward. And we've requested $12 million a year it's been proposed by the governor's budget to do $12 million a year again for the next 2 years for the biennium. And so it's a great tool. I mean, we don't have it for every industry. I always say to Paul Lavoie, whose name I can't believe hasn't come up until right now in this hour that we have, but our chief manufacturing officer, he's got it great, because he can go to any company that he visits is by definition a manufacturer, and we have this set of resources that are dedicated towards manufacturers. I visit every industry, and I only get to talk about MIF when I go to manufacturers. So anyway, it's great. It's a great dedicated source of funds for mostly are small and medium manufacturers. So I guess when he's visiting the big ones, he can't offer it. But the 3 big initiatives there that folks should be aware of are incumbent worker training, apprenticeships, and MVP, the manufacturing voucher program, which helps pay for equipment. And all 3 of those are, meaningful. It's not going to build you a factory, but they're really, I think, meaningful contributions from the state towards investments by manufacturers to innovate, hence the Manufacturing Innovation Fund. And they're well utilized. They're, I think, make a big difference. We do, in many cases, require a sort of match, which is a theme of DECD. We want to make sure that the private sector is putting their own skin in the game, but it's one of the programs I think that's just most tactical.
They're almost all a 1-for-1 match, right? Dollar for dollar match?
Yeah. Yes, I think MVP, as you use it again, the private sector has to put in more.
Yeah, I feel like a second time through.
Uses.
Yeah, which is new, right? Because originally we could only use it once every bit. So they had, listen, free money, match money is match money, right? So
exactly. Yeah. If you needed that piece of equipment,
yes,
you probably aren't sad that we're giving you something for the second and third time that you use it.
No.
So anyway, super tactical. I think anyone who's listening who I think 300 is the number of employees that it's capped out at. So if that describes you, Paul always tells me it's so cheesy. It's money for manufacturers. That's what you Google Connecticut money for manufacturers. I think that might even be the URL, and it'll walk you through. It's actually a CCAT website that will walk you through all the different application portals for these MIF funds. And I haven't done it myself, although I probably should secret shop. But I hear it's pretty easy to do, and that's the point.
It is pretty easy to do, and I mean, manufacturers. We have brought it up many times, as you say, but I find there's always somebody who hasn't heard about it or thinks it's too onerous. But I do think that listen, to your point, it helps you with stuff you're going to do anyway, and potentially on the equipment. I think I've seen it used for this is you may be thinking about, hey, how can I get some Industry 4.0 technology? How can I get additive manufacturing? Like I want to try something, and I think part of this fund idea is innovation, as you mentioned. So hey, you want to try and buy a piece of equipment to try out, say like additive manufacturing. The state will partner with you essentially 50-50, to help put that equipment in place. So really huge opportunity to lever up to help innovate. And you mentioned encumbered worker training. So I love it, and I'll ask you what I asked David unsuccessfully, which was to increase the amount of MIF.
We went from 10 to 12.
Yeah, I know, but I already knew that.
Increase from 12.
Yeah. So I look at it as like 25 because, for the biennium, and I think we should go to 50. That was my opening gambit. He thought that was too low. So but apparently I didn't get anything on it. So I'll relodge my request. Because I do think, one thing under DECD that I have said, and this is a economic development tool that I think has been really borne out to be really important, which is to partner, meaning don't just give away money, don't just give it away, but match funds. Yep. And I think that probably ends up with better results because then the user of the funds cares a lot more about what they're doing 100%. Than sort of the free money. So in my view, more matching to more investments, really going back to your priorities, really helps with that attracting and retaining businesses, helping small businesses grow, help make the state marketing feel better and all that stuff. So you've got my pitch for 50 million. So next time you're on, let's see what we did with that. Listen, I think we've actually covered all the really great stuff. Is there anything about DCD or any message you want to get out that I didn't ask about or anything?
I'll just reiterate what I said before, which is we want to hear proposals of ways that we could be improving doing business in Connecticut. And especially, it's really helpful if we know it's happening to a bunch of folks and that they are all seeing the same trend and that they're speaking with one voice. Now, that doesn't mean individual businesses can't call us directly and tell us, hey, they're seeing this big issue and how can we help them with it? But that is a big part of our mandate. And so when I get this opportunity to speak to a lot of businesses at one time, I want to reiterate that and say, especially if you have a solution.
Yes.
I really love hearing people's feedback, negative feedback when it also has, and by the way, you should do this to fix it. And come to us with those ideas.
That's great. Yeah, Alexandra's contact information, not her home address and stuff, but your work contact information will be in the show notes and links. So anyone who wants to find it can get it there. All right. It's your first time on, so we are going to do the rapid fire round of questions. Are you ready? They're easy. Yeah. Just get ready to roll with it. You good?
Okay. Yeah, sure.
All right. Red Sox or Yankees?
Not a sports fan.
Okay. Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Don't drink coffee.
Wow.
Never had coffee.
You're going to have to.
I do like iced tea, and I like my iced tea at Starbucks.
There you go.
But I have never drank coffee.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
SUV.
Staycation or exotic destination?
exotic destination, urban.
Urban. There you go. Do you have a favorite business book?
This is called The Real Estate Game,
It's
which
fine.
was when I read when I started in real estate, and it really breaks it down. And it was great, but
Real Estate
not
Game? That's all right.
not
That's fine.
relevant to.
That's okay.
But they might find it interesting. Yes,
Yeah,
I
that's
like.
fine. The Real Estate Game, no problem. If you had to do something other than be the commissioner of DECD, and it could be anything in the world, no holds barred, what would you spend your time doing?
I would like to run a business that has a bricks and mortar presence, and I would like to be physically in that bricks and mortar. So a store, a restaurant, I don't know, a workshop or something, but I would like to be on a main street physically every day, having people come in and out of the door.
Wow. Well, that's definitely achievable. What's something?
I'll lose money doing it, but I'll retire to own a store that'll be just for me and
That's
for
quite
my
all right.
family. Yeah, something like that.
What's something, Alexandra, that you learned early in your life or early in your career that you think's helped propel you to all the success that you've had?
You were asking me earlier, am I overworking myself? And I think this is going to be a really non-inspirational answer. I learned how to overwork myself early in life, and it's a really important skill to learn, turn it on and work. 1 week you're working 40 hours and then the governor appoints you to be the commissioner, and the next week you're working 80 hours a week, and that's the new reality for a long time. That's something I learned I was a big nerd in high school. I was a big nerd in college, and I did every page of reading, and so that was a skill I learned then that has served me well on and off throughout my adult career. It's great to have times when you're not doing that, but in the last couple months, it's been good to remember how to drink a lot of hot tea late at night, no coffee for me, just for no particular reason, and then and stay up late and get the work done.
I get that. What's something, Alexandra, that you learned later in your life or later in your career that if you went back and told young Alexandra and she'd listened to you, have a real positive impact on her?
It's kind of the opposite of what I just said, interestingly, which is I remember a couple jobs ago, but they were saying that all the senior partners at the firm that I worked at, the reason they were successful was it's all had to do with interpersonal skills and very little to do with technical skills, which was very weird because when I was junior at that firm, it was all about technical skills. So looking up at the senior folks, I thought, wait, so I have to have a whole nother set of skills to get up there? Anyway, point is, I think as you get further along in your career, the interpersonal elements are more and more important, and it's you have to work really hard and get all the technical right, but you really have to get the interpersonal right as well.
That's actually very, very well said. Alexandra, I'm going to leave it right there. Thank you so very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This has been great.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by CompassMSP.
Thanks for listening and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a strong manufacturing community, and it would be impossible to do without all of you.